Okay, Rich, thanks for joining me here in Culinary Table in Lanseria. We're here at the designated South African smart city of the future.
Really, really glad to be here this morning with you, and wonderful venue. Gee whiz, the topic is so broad. I've often referred to this space as being just, I guess, full of surprises. I mean, there's just so many layers to it, and we talk about sort of wrapping digital around things, and so I'm really excited to get into the conversation and take you through some of this modern tooling technique that we have available to us, which really can help transform an industry. So thanks for having me, Seb.
So yeah, Rich, we've been chatting for quite some time about Internet of Things, or IoT. Put a bit of perspective for everybody watching. We're Staycold. I'm Staycold. We manufacture beverage coolers. We've always liked to think of ourselves as being at quite the forefront or the vanguard of technology, especially when it comes to green energy and things that will put our fridges a cut above the rest and will demonstrate their ability to perform. We got chatting probably about 3, 4, maybe even 5 years ago about IoT and what is called in the marketplace telemetry on our fridges, as it's something that our customers are asking about and have had various people presenting to them.
Yeah.
From a perspective of digital twin and what is it that you guys do, maybe just if you could give us a bit of background into how you came into the space and
Yeah, sure, Seb. No, thanks. Gosh, it's an interesting topic. I think, with all the modernization of tooling and where we are, just if you think about IoT as an acronym, we all love these 3-letter acronyms, but IoT is just one of those modernization techniques, and whether IoT or IIoT or cloud computing, big data, there's so many of them. But I think for us, digital twin was born out of almost necessity. So the background of digital twins shareholding and sort of lead as far as the vision is concerned comes from an industrial process control perspective. And what we found was that we were just seeing, certainly from my perspective, I was just seeing how, from a personal point of view, we were all transforming. If you consider how with banks today, nobody goes back to queues. Very rarely do you go into a bank. The evolution of how we've dealt with banking. The same can be said with how we communicate with each other. From an old telephone, showing my age here, where you used to turn the dial, to today, where it's instantaneous over WhatsApp, Signal, all these messaging platforms. But what I realized very quickly is, despite being in the industrial process space, the industry had not evolved. Industry itself has not evolved. So personally we've evolved, but we haven't allowed our businesses and our industrial capability,
the methods that we use
and the methods to evolve as much as we have personally. So I thought that would be an interesting challenge to go and solve, and hence the start of digital twin. And digital twin, people might know it for its term. Digital twin's a well-known term, certainly was back when I was in the industrial space around advanced modeling and simulations. But I just love the name in a much broader context. Everybody talks about the metaverse, talking about how we're digitizing things, and what better way to just describe exactly that as your digital twin or as an asset's digital twin. So the name, was an obvious one for us to.
So it's really, from coming from a manufacturing background or manufacturing company, we make these objects which effectively are dumb.
Yes.
Probably shouldn't refer to my fridges as dumb in that respect. It's dumb in the
perform a specific task.
From a specific task. We make a unit, we ship it out of our factory, and it goes into the field. And then after that, we really don't know anything about it. We can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't. In fact, the only time we actually know anything about it is probably when something goes wrong on it, and they call us up from a warranty or breakdown perspective. So the great thing, and what really kind of like got my interest as an individual in IoT, is this ability to be able to see virtually a product which you've never been able to see before. And what can that bring to you? What can that bring to us as a manufacturer? How can we then broaden that out to speak to our customers about it and to say, look, this is something really worth having a look at.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, again, when we met, Seb, it was terrific because it was really, I saw it as pushing the boundaries because, when you talk about an industrial asset, whether it be a multi-million rand compressor, whether it be, yellow metal is always an interesting one to look at, but just generally high value assets. The economics is a simple conversation.
Yeah.
It is the asset is very costly. It's very important to operations continuation and continuity. Whereas so then the cost of wrapping that asset digitally,
Chucking a probe on that is
putting a few probes, a few sensors, some edge capability, it's almost a non-event because of the economics. But what really fascinated me, Seb, was when we spoke about how a cooler, which ranges in value, but significantly.
It's a high value item in perspective to what it sells.
Exactly.
It's 100 times more expensive than the can of soft drink you're going to pull out of it.
Yes.
But in relation to your high value assets, the cost of cloaking that unit with sensors is huge.
Exactly.
In proportion to its value.
I have a paper trail of my procurement, and I know roughly what happens, and I can probably have, wherever that asset's been delivered to, I can probably have a contract that governs some level of accountability for the asset.
Sure.
Right. Now, so you could probably argue the economics a bit on that single dimension. Now, as you start layering on the value with this digital wrapper, so to speak, if you start layering on it, so now not just location, now you've got condition monitoring. So what is that fridge actually doing? What is the temperature of that fridge? What's the condenser doing? What's the door contact doing? What are all these variables? Let's call it metadata for lack of a better word. All this ancillary data that can be used by several stakeholders. And the key one I think we've always spoken about is condition monitoring. What's the condition of that asset?
Well, from a manufacturer, that's key for us. We like to think that we manufacture these products that don't break down, but evidence tells us that they do break down, and what causes that, and how much of that is externally influenced, and how much of that is internally influenced within the product. And so, knowing the condition of the unit, knowing whether it's getting too hot externally, understanding what is happening internally from a temperature point of view, how often is it defrosting, that for us we have no vision on whatsoever. Classically within our business model, other than what we are told in a snapshot from either a customer ringing us up or a technician going to visit.
Exactly.
And so when that does happen and the customer rings us up and says, my fridge is broken down, what telemetry or digital twin or the technology gives us is the ability to not just look at it in real time, but also to track back over a week period or a 2-week period to see what is happening to that fridge that caused it on last week Sunday to all of a sudden not make cold. And that's when we have the real-time snapshot, the physical, human interaction snapshot on that. And so, and then even wind that back, it would be glorious for us to be able to kind of preempt that. So even before that human interaction comes in, of the customer picking up the phone and saying, "Oh, my product's spoiled," we can actually say, "Hang on a second, let's get our technician out there on Wednesday, fix the problem," and nobody knows it was. You're almost separating out the.
And this is the stuff that starts to get my juices going.
Yeah.
And I know yours too. So the thing is now, so as you correctly said, is you can start to establish what patterns represent an outcome. So a pattern might be condenser split. Now you would know this better than I would as the specialist in beverage coolers. But what I've learned over the years is that there's certain triggers to say, listen, this asset is in a bit of trouble. We need to do something proactively about it. And it's defining those patterns with subject matter expertise that now you start to codify into the solution. So
raise a flag.
Raise a flag. Raise a flag. This condition is happening, and if that starts to show signs of happening, this is the likely outcome. So hence you start moving from a data set that's very, very retrospective to real time, right, which is collection of this data, either processing at the edge or at the cloud, wherever you choose to compute the data.
But automate the process.
But one step further is translating that into prediction, right? Prediction about what's going to happen. So these sort of conversations are happening all the time in big industry and in big propco space and infrastructure, critical infrastructure, which is brilliant. But for me, the real challenger was to bring this into the context of the beverage cooler, right? Which has been the fascinating journey for us. And interestingly enough, is all of these concepts are highly relevant.
No, for sure.
And highly valuable. So we've discussed it's location and condition monitoring, right?
But what else is there?
What else is there?
That's where it gets good, isn't it? I mean, we've often talked about, we have probably in South Africa, I would say, 300, 400,000 beverage coolers, not necessarily Staycolds, but across the way. And when you think about them, imagine the kind of mesh that casts across the country in terms of where these beverage coolers are. And I think one thing that really gets you going is, what if you knew what was happening in and around all of those items?
Oh, man. That term we always use, the art of the possible.
What can we know from that? Exactly. And it's that door that opens. I've always looked at IoT from a very selfish point of view as Staycold in terms of what can we know from the product.
Yes.
But it's what can we open up to our customers, and what can we open up to our stakeholders in terms of what that fridge with the ability to talk through the cloud about things that are happening around it and in it just is crazy. I mean,
exactly. We talk about almost heroing the beverage cooler, whether it be serving beer in a tavern, whether it be serving nutritional drinks in a nutritional bar, whether it be whatever the product, there's a demographic that gravitates to that product. Why not hero that asset? Why not have that asset perform way more than just telemetry and take it to the point where it actually operates in some way as a hotspot for people coming into that facility, into that tavern, into that bar, wherever it might be, is can you imagine where that can go? If you start looking at how you would create a loyalty, you'd create a natural gravity towards that cooler almost as the hero in that area, because I'm arriving there, I get free Wi-Fi potentially, right? And I'm able to access the net. And in doing that, there's loads of data. Of course, we've always got to be considerate of the POPI Act, but just to understand beyond what is obvious with using the cooler as a natural concentration point of insight and data throughput.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like you say, making the cooler the hero is the key thing. Because at the moment, the cooler is the hero in so much as it makes the drinks cold.
It makes my drink cold, which I'm happy with.
Which is really cool, and that's why, it's there.
Yeah.
But what can you as a marketeer or a company that owns hundreds, maybe thousands of these units in the market, what else can you get it to do?
Exactly.
Or what else can it do for you? What information can it provide you from a marketing point of view about your customers? Is it linking to it through your own app and that kind of thing? That's where the art of the possible is.
And I think
really
from a marketeer's perspective, marketers. I think I'm an engineer by discipline, but I like to think that I've evolved into a sales and marketing. I have a love of sales and marketing. That's certainly my DNA. And I think if you think of it from a marketing perspective, how the stickiness of as a brand. Let's talk. One of the big brands. Maybe we don't name them, but one of the big brands wants to create stickiness with their customer.
Sure.
What better way to attract them to their product by offering them an ancillary service, right? Which then starts to almost create an intimacy, if that's the correct word, right?
Yeah, I mean, as it is at the moment, the cooler in the shop is making the beer cold, so the owner is happy because he's serving cold beer. Yeah. The customer is coming in, and apart from getting a cold beer, which is the expectation, not necessarily, that's what he wants. But if that fridge or that piece of equipment that is provided by the big company also provides that customer with internet access.
It's a distributed extension of that company.
Sure.
It's got to serve product, and it's got to serve it cold, and it's got to serve it within the correct quantities based on peak periods.
So let's not get away from what it's there for.
Let's do that.
In the ultimate.
That's table stakes, right?
Yeah.
But what about a distributed network of a major beverage company who wants to have a far more interesting relationship with the people using their product? Why not use that as the gateway?
Maybe need to just track back to the product itself in terms of what through Staycold and Digital Twin we've developed with the Marconi as back in the early days when we first started, it was boxes with wires and we were plugging probes in and things like that. And we've spoken about the cost of the item being somewhat of a barrier.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Table stakes
to go in. You need to have something that is cost. There's no point in you charging the same amount for your device as you are for the fridge. The guys are, I'll just buy 2 fridges, thanks, man. But if you can get from a price perspective down, and that's where we really dove into it, and I think it was influenced by this cost element to the customer, both in terms of what the item costs as an add-on to the fridge, but to make it simple.
Those early days were enormous in exponential learning. And then, of course, we realized very quickly that you need to be cost sensitive, very cost sensitive, again, because of what we've discussed earlier around ratios of cost to asset. But then it became a case of having the ability to consider 2 things. So it's the greenfield, which is our wonderful relationship with Staycold, where we can load up the technology as the fridge is being manufactured. And look, that's the ideal condition, right? Because everything's controlled, everything's in a process, it's a standard procedure, it goes out the door, and for the life of the fridge, off we go. The challenge was in the retrofit. So, and this is just definitely a far more complicated thing to solve. And that's where the ease of installation, like you said, is so critical. And I think the evolution of derivative 1, derivative 2, derivative 3, derivative 4, and where we are now, that's where I think our light bulb moment really sort of has made a difference.
That's when we kind of understood that, well, actually,
exactly.
I referred to the fridge as a dumb object previously.
Yes.
Whereas it is in that essence of the word, but what we do have in the fridges and what we have had for a number of years is this little controller, which is the brain. The problem is the only way that brain could communicate to us in the past was via a little 3-digit display.
Exactly.
And that's where I think we kind of were like, well, hey, if we could tap into what that knows.
Exactly. So what you would have thought would have been an obvious thing, we eventually got there because we were trying to parallel the technology, and that has its space for sure. There are cases where there may not be a controller that is interfaceable. So there you do want to have an opportunity to put a completely parallel system in place and still get the data.
Well, sometimes some guys need it from a due diligence point of view. They can't just trust
a
redundant
system.
A redundancy system.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But for most cases, it became very obvious that just integrating into that controller. Now there comes obviously some obvious questions with that. Is there's got to be an OEM that's willing to allow you to chat to the controller, right? And not just display the data through that. A lot
of them are trying to do their own thing with that.
Of course, and everybody wants to offer that service to the market. But the trouble is you've got I like to refer it to as a fruit salad. You've got bananas, peaches, apples, pears, and each one of them is trying to do something, but ultimately the client wants an aggregated solution.
Yeah, I mean, even with fridges, it's not as if it's, I wish, it's not as if it was Staycold supplying the market into the fridges. But
and Staycold's preferred controller. There's what's called sort of Modbus, and there's a particular way that we interfaced with this controller, which I really can't speak about too much, but effectively, it's a way of communicating over an industrial protocol that says, hey, give me the information you've got, and then I'm going to go and publish that, backhaul it to the cloud infrastructure, whichever the customer would like to see, and then also allow for, interestingly enough, bidirectional and backward communication to the controller. So in cases where you want to put something into an eco mode, or in fact change a set point, now that's not common requirement, But you can imagine if you're running a campaign.
You could freak some people out by turning lights on and off.
Yeah, well, again, going to that art of the possible, when you've got a marketeer's mindset and you want to engage with the fridge, right? You want to have that bi-directional capability. You might want to, happy hour, boom, you start flashing the light at the top.
The header panel.
The header panel, flashing that thing or whatever it might be to indicate happy time on, or not happy time, yes, but happy hour on us, the beverage supplier, and have a relationship in the background with that tavern owner that sort of governs that happy hour relationship. But you want to have that bi-directional communication. So we were very keen on that, and we got that done as well. And gosh, that's been really successful. And and obviously we are doing the other brands as well, which allows us to interface to their controllers. And what that does, Seb, as you now know, is it allows the client to have this agnostic view, and to a point where they say, well, it doesn't really matter what's in the field. We're still going to get our data.
Yeah.
Right. And we're not going to have 3 or 4 OEM systems that we have to eventually have 3 or 4 different methods of extracting data.
You want to buy one box that does the
Everything.
whole lot.
Yeah.
That interfaces with the whole thing. It's like a Bluetooth protocol.
Yeah. You want to make it simple.
If Nokia had their own protocol and iPhone had their own protocol, the world would be a complete disaster.
Chaos.
But having that communication over a common network or a common language as such that you can just fit that item into, it's good. And the ease of the fitment as well, because we've got now, one wire.
One wire. You've just got so many options out there that I think it often, it's almost like pollutes the conversation, and people, it's difficult to know that you've made the right choice, and whether it's actually sustainable, right? So you, as to your point, you want to get the data, but not at that cost.
Because you're not doing this for a month thing, are you?
Totally.
You're looking
committing.
probably. I mean, if you take the average beverage cooler, they like to kind of amortize it over a 5 to 7 year period. So that if you went ahead and did your 20,000, 30,000 fleet of fridges with one device, which communicated on one network, and then all of a sudden that network doesn't exist anymore for whatever reason, you're kind of like left holding the can for that for the next 6 years, or you have to reinvest into it. So it's that compatibility.
Exactly. So then again, the critical decision factor there is what, in my mind and in our thinking as an organisation, and of course, kudos to our sort of horsepower at the office, our engineering horsepower, particularly Craig, who's our chief engineer. We were debating this, and the key factors are, we really have to have something again that is ubiquitous, right? So don't talk about something that is limited in its reach, or is going to be available, or is potentially, those things are just too uncertain. So you've got to have, first of all, what is ubiquitous today? So it's the cellular spectrum, it's the cellular infrastructure. And is that going away? No. I mean, there's enormous investment in infrastructure.
Not just country, but also not just within a country. But
exactly. Because these things don't just. If we knew exactly where they were going to go, which country and in which area, we would, make it a bit easier. But that's not. You take that complexity out by creating the degrees of freedom, and the degrees of freedom come from, I can choose any bearer, and I can be pretty much anywhere in the world, and I'll establish a form of communication back. And not only from a cellular perspective, but then there's also the alternative route back is by establishing a Wi-Fi connection. So you've got to have various paths, and you've got to have, that's the secret then, is to have the autonomy within the device, to be smart enough to say, which path am I using? And which is the path of least cost? And it kind
of jumps back into the cost thing is very important, because we all know about roaming costs and things like that. But if you're not having to fork out for probes and wires to put into a unit, you can spend that money on the tech inside of it. And you can have your because they're all modems, they're all components. You have to pay for them. It's not as if can you chuck in a free Wi-Fi modem? It's
silicon.
It has to be paid for.
And it's scarce nowadays.
Try getting hold of that now. So you kind of you want to go for the Wi-Fi, you want to go for the Bluetooth. And that cost element that they add on in what is already a very tightly cost-controlled thing is quite important.
Exactly.
So that all speaks to that development that we did on it. We want to get as good a communication as possible,
Without overcooking
the price. And if we can do that by not having to install 13 probes onto the unit to monitor all these various different temperatures, brilliant.
Put the money into where it really makes a difference.
Spend the money there.
So that's it. So to have the device being able to choose the most appropriate path, obviously, first of all, the device has got to be capable of multiple paths. But I think the early days, and I'm definitely going to punt a vendor here, or a supplier at least, is ThinkStream, you know, who've recently, not recently, gosh.
I mean, I never heard of them, Rich. When
you'd never heard of them. Exactly.
When you talked about things, I was like, who's that? You know, where are these guys from?
What is this thing you speak of?
But it's and that was a really interesting eye opener for me in terms of that technology. It was on the. I mean, you'll speak about it better than me, but that USSD network and things like that. You know, what is that?
Exactly. So what were the boxes that it ticked? The boxes were, I'm available on the ubiquitous network. You can choose. I can choose any bearer that's available in its concentration in the area, and whether I'm in Kenya, whether I'm in Johannesburg, whether I'm in Dar es Salaam, whether I'm in Munich, it will attach itself to a bearer. And then not only does it attach itself to any bearer, it then uses the most efficient method of getting that data back. So again, though, it goes hand in hand with the intelligence that you develop in the device to make it autonomous.
What do you do on the edge?
Yes, that little edge compute is so important, is to be able to bundle, package, store data, and then create the most efficient way of messaging it. So establish the connection, and this is where you learned about, this is going 4 years ago now, USSD. Ubiquitous in the payment space. Right.
I mean, everyone knows it.
Everyone knew of it.
When you're checking your balance on your phone, that's what you're using.
100%. And I'm using USSD to establish a connection when I'm roaming, and am I allowed to connect or not? So it's that little subtle ability to now communicate small, efficient packets of data, which was a real differentiator for us back then. And it still remains a differentiator, you know, because of its geographic span and its bearer agnostic. But there are so many other options, you know. There are the options nowadays. There seems to be this race to zero as far as data costs are concerned. You know, and everybody's competing not only for screen time, but for the data. And with that comes this hugely competitive space with data racing to zero. And then again, depending on application, there are also great alternatives there to turn on data. You know, and I think the beauty is that as that telco space is evolving, there's going to be less and less lock-in to a provider, and there's going to be more and more flexibility and protection for the client, the user, to switch. Right. So you're going to see this ability to switch between bearers, and so it's a wonderful space, ever evolving.
But it's critical to our application.
Critical to the application, but it's the balance of edge, backhauling technology, and cloud compute. Those three, you can't look at either one of them in isolation. You've got to develop the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, as we call it in our model. Disregarding 4 and 5 for now, but equally as critical. And I won't bore you with that. But 1, 2, and 3, you've got to look at in unison. Otherwise, you can very quickly get caught out if you've chosen the wrong.
And I think
approach.
That's the space that we're in at the moment is really exciting. And when we're kind of like talking to clients and demonstrating it. The demonstration is part of the sale as such. As let me open my laptop here and boom, 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 boom. A load of units pop up and they tell the temperature, they tell you where it is, and this one's got a bit of a problem there. But almost that visual interface that we got at the moment, I can see the space moving into more of like they do with CCTV with your black screen.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that edge processing, you don't need to be looking at it to know that it's okay. What you need to be doing is you need to be told when I'm not okay.
Yes, exactly.
And that's where it kind of like, I guess I kind of like maybe speak more so for the condition side of things.
Yes, exactly.
Is if you're fine,
you're fine.
I don't need 100,000 coolers telling me I'm okay.
Exactly.
But what I do need is the 10 coolers telling me I'm a bit hot.
And in this beverage cooler space, and the way you've come to that point where you're saying, just tell me when something is off kilter, right? So that's something that, and I'm going to refer to my previous life when I was at Honeywell as a process engineer and whatnot, is one of the key things is when you look at a control room and of a petrochemical refinery, for example, let's say you've got, hundreds of thousands of I/O, inputs and outputs. And on your screen are pumps starting and valves opening, actuators doing what
Looks
they
like a
need
nuclear
to do.
power plant in front of you, kind of thing. Yeah.
Sure, it's intimidating,
Yeah.
right? There's just so much. But these operators are specifically trained. This is a really, really sophisticated role that these guys are playing in understanding what's going on in the process, using the instrumentation and the visuals to make decisions. And years ago, gosh man, over a decade, maybe even two now, the term was used as abnormal situation management, right? So ASM, and the ASM consortium in the industrial space, fascinating. It was all about that. It was all about almost dulling down, almost making it completely irrelevant if things are working as they should. So we know what the operating parameters are. You know, as the manufacturer of the fridge, this is the expected operating condition. I don't care if anything's outside of those conditions. I don't care as an owner of the asset if it's outside of that geography, right? I don't care if it's, so there are a lot of don't cares. So why communicate the don't cares? Why communicate the don't cares? It's just using resource.
Yeah.
So abnormal condition monitoring or abnormal situation monitoring, ASM, is for me a philosophy that I've brought from those days into everything that I think about regarding how to make it easier and how to improve the user experience at the end of the day.
What do you need to know?
What do you really need to know? Sure, the little edge device can do some edge processing, and I think you hear about all these things like fog computing and cloud computing, and really it's just how autonomous is that little goodie to make decisions, right? And it can go ahead and look. I mean, if it knows that the working operating condition would be, let's take temperature as example, right? I mean, your fridge, you want it to operate at between
2 and 8 degrees. If it stays within there, we're comfortable.
There you go, 2 and 8 degrees.
Yeah.
So anything outside of that, it even goes further. When you're going into a defrost cycle, for example, if it's a freezer, then typically what that's going to do is a cycle. And if it all falls within that, we call our little edge devices, we call them after birds. So then the little bird's not going to say anything. It's not going to take the message back.
It's not going to tweet back and say, there's a problem here.
Exactly.
Okay, my temperature's 10 degrees, but hang on, my door was open for half an hour.
Why?
So let's close it. I'll wait another half an hour, and if the temperature comes back down, I'm not going to say anything. But if the temperature keeps on rising after the door is shut,
tell me.
Hello.
Or if these specific conditions are being met, tell me. And don't just tell me.
And I think that's...
Plug it into a standard operating procedure that I can act on, so that becomes actionable insight, right? So there is that. There is definitely that. And I think I'm blown away that you've got there naturally,
But there's the thing where that communication channel that we've got where, if let's say we, I don't know, onboarded a customer and they wanted 10,000 units to go into trade, and we ship those 10,000 units out, they get put in, and then 3 months later or 4 months later, they come back to us, or we discover that we're getting far too many alarms here, let's change the firmware or something like that. Now, if we didn't have that ability to two-way communicate with the control, that's another 10,000 visits by a technician to do it. But if we can just do, I remember you talking about the little packets that just get sent over a period of time to build up into one final piece of software that once it's all there, once you've got your 300 data packets on board, then install and it goes on. And that's really kind of like an exciting space. So you can change the parameters and you can change the ways of working on the fly.
Absolutely. So I mean, you've got what we call COTA and FOTA. Right? So COTA, which is configuration over the air. Essential, table stakes. You need to be able to interact with because the one thing about this when you do wrap this asset, particularly a fridge, for example, which is low cost compared to a compressor, a large compressor as an example, you do need to be cost conscious, and you can't for a minute think that you can actually send beyond the installation, whether it be retrofit, you cannot send a technician to that fridge to fix that device.
You might be able to do one within your cost basis.
Maybe one, or if it's part of a normal service process.
Yeah.
Simple, right? But as soon as you have to send somebody to that device to do something, the economics break, right? Because of the cost sensitivity. So now you have to have configuration over the air, minimum, and you've got to have FOTA, which is firmware over the air. And firmware is what you're referring to regarding the personality of the bird. You want to be able to repurpose, update, change, secure, patch security issues. And those are all what you'd think to be, table stakes, but it's how you elevate that to make it so easy, and the user experience again, to make that personality change, to make the tweaks that differentiate again between success and failure, to be honest.
Yeah, it's almost, you only really get one shot at it, don't you?
Yeah.
In terms of getting from the hardware.
Yeah, I've loved the way you've seen and conceptualized the different models around, OpEx, or almost like cold space as a service.
Yes.
Is that something you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it lends itself to it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really that. It's a fascinating market, the beverage cooler. I mean, it's, I'm sure everyone would talk about their market in terms of it being fascinating, but just where we see the market progressing in South Africa and in Africa, and how our customers want to interact with their I always say it's, to a lot of our customers, the beverage cooler is a grudge purchase.
Yes.
It's something they have to buy. The guy that's brewing the beer just wants to brew beer.
Exactly.
He doesn't want to be in charge of a fleet of 20,000 fridges, which he then needs to fix when it breaks down, or deliver, or move, or change location. That's not core to his business. And so the evolution of the marketplace, and it's happened elsewhere in the world to varying degrees of success and things like that, and I think there's a lot of learnings coming into South Africa as a result of it, is the brewer just wants to say, Seb, sort my fridge out. It's not working. Or I need a fridge there. And that, I mean, geez, I could talk forever about, do you run a fleet of fridges on 80% of capacity because you're constantly moving? Once you get to a critical mass of fridges, and that's where IoT comes into.
And I think that's the point, right? That if you start looking at things like cold or hot space as a service, cold space as a service. Now to do that, for both parties, it's critical that you understand precisely what's going on with that asset. Both condition, location, etc.
Yeah.
Because your risk of disruption to the economic model is enormous. If you offering that service, are seeing that the machine's not being used correctly, it's not potentially being maintained correctly. So it does bring huge value to the market, being able to subscribe to a cold space. Hey, Seb, I need 100 square meters of cold space.
Sure, yeah.
How's it going to cost me?
Yeah.
And I'm holding you to account that this thing
And
works.
I'm only ever going to pay you that.
And I'm only ever paying you that.
Don't come running to me for anything else.
No, I can forecast nicely, into my financial, into my P&L, but gosh, where does the risk transfer? There's always an obligation that transfers, and then what you do is, I think, with the system that we've built and the kind of intelligence and the insights that you glean from it, that starts to take at least action on mitigating that risk.
Yeah, and I think it also gives you, it automates the process an awful lot as well.
Exactly.
Your asset management becomes dead simple.
Yes.
You don't have to send out reps to every single place that you've got fridges to know that fridge is there. You click a button and 98% of my fridges are all verifying themselves within the last 30 minutes.
Exactly.
And
whereas invariably that insight,
no, go on.
And invariably that insight helps you as Staycold to further refine the model.
Yeah.
Right? Because let's be honest, at first you're going to price for risk.
Yeah.
You'll certainly price for risk. If there's something that's unknown, and you'll try and take as many actions as you can to mitigate it. But the more and more insight you gain, the more and more of these patterns that we speak of are able to be mitigated.
You need not price that in.
You need not price the risk, right? Which means
your ownership model becomes tiny.
100%.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting space, especially when it comes to leasing and rental of equipment. It's crazy. I mean, you've got a bit of experience in the larger industrial things in terms of I'm renting out this equipment, and I've got something in nail spray, and there's 100%. A guy in Bella Bella that wants it. It's a lot more effective for me to take the one from nail spray, put it into Bella Bella, and then ship one from Cape Town.
Exactly.
You know, it's all about knowing that, and I guess
and specifically, you know, you refer to that. You know, when you start looking at things like license agreements, you start looking at performance metrics of machines, of a combination of machines. These things are critical. You know? And so it's translating that concept, that mindset of total asset management and performance management in those performance metrics, is getting that information to start knowing or to create. Sorry, this is getting really cheesy. The digital twin of that fridge, right? You want to know how that guy is performing, where he is in his life cycle, where he or she rather is vulnerable. How are we going to improve the life cycle of that fridge? Let's not get the average, I don't know what, 8-10 years, I don't know, but let's push that boundary. Let's, through what we've learned and through how we can actually look after that asset, we can get her to live a lot longer.
What's been really good for Staycold as a South African manufacturer is being able to work with the South African manufacturer of technology. You know, we had a number of conversations with European parties and you know, people from overseas and things like that. And that ability to not be able to sit down and have a discussion with, and to know that, you know, we're supporting our own economy in doing it. I think that's amazing. And there's great stuff happening in South Africa in this space. I mean, you know,
could be so much more.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, Seb, it's terrific. I mean, you know, when we talk to you and talking to Lena, the vision around, you know, remaining contextual and remaining committed. And, you know, building, we really are. We've got, you know, you guys have got people in Paris building these coolers. Wonderful operation. I mean, it was a real privilege to come through that first day and then multiple visits thereafter. It's a privilege to see what goes on in that factory. And for us as well, I mean, not as big, but certainly we have our own manufacturing capability in South Africa, proudly designed, manufactured, delivered and supported, you know.
And that's critical to us. And I mean, you know, we always we manufacture fridges here in South Africa for the African market primarily. And that to our customers is key as well. Because unless you're in the market, unless you know the market, you cannot understand the challenges.
Exactly.
And I think the very fact that you're in the same market with us, you have an appreciation of the challenges that we have, and we have an appreciation of your challenges, means that, you know, it's not it's a much easier discussion to have, and a much more solvable problem when that knowledge is there.
Exactly. You know, you can collaborate on things that are common challenges. You know, common areas that are, and for better or for worse, you know, I like to think it's for better. You know, South Africa brings a host of challenges and opportunities, you know, and I think it's solving them together as we have in our partnership here that's really been good, where the context is not appreciated in most cases. The technology is borderless and the technology translates, but the customer intimacy is what really makes the difference. It's not something that you can just sort of stick on and away we go and hope for the best. There really is this intimacy that makes a difference, and of course not only beyond what we find as a great benefit for the end user and the overall user experience. It's not a case of there's this detachment. You know, they can really, as you said, and I think it's a great one. They come and eyeball us and be part of the process. You know, there's that great concept.
Give us your challenge.
Yeah, it's a great like
what's your problems, bud? Let me help you solve them.
Solve them. I mean, there's this notion of co-creation. I think it's beautiful. You know, I mean, we've gone to the days when there's this kind of like of course, there's always a willing buyer, willing seller, but it's gone to the days when it's, you know, you like
this is what we do. You either take it or you don't.
You like my acha, you try my acha, you buy my acha. I think I said it right. But it's more a case of, hey, you know, this is what we have, but in your particular application, you might need this thing to be a little bit different, right? You might need it to do it something more unique, and that's the co-creation piece, right? That is what really also excites me. It's not this like static transaction. that either it works or it doesn't for me. There's a lot of flexibility.
Yes, it's constantly evolving.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think like with anything, we've maybe been in a situation with beverage coolers where it's always they're big boxes that make things cold, and that's what everyone's always expected them to do.
Yeah.
But that is changing. There's always the marketing guys are always the biggest driver of that.
Yeah, of course.
They want a different look, or they want a different, and we have to evolve with that.
Of course.
And I think we want to stay core to our values as Staycold of being at the forefront of technology that will drive that change.
Yeah.
So, Rich, thanks a million for joining me here today. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you as always, and always seem to learn something new, and really excited to keep the momentum that we've got on this and delving deeper into the art of the possible, as you always like to call it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sip. Always going to be always good to chat to you, and certainly a great venue. I extend my gratitude to them as well. Wonderful to be here. And the art of the possible. Let's make that art possible.
Yeah. Thanks a million, Rich.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.